Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at something, well, quite unusual. A set of sources where former U.S. intelligence community officers have turned their analytical focus inward.
Right. These are folks usually analyzing threats outside the U.S., but here they've applied that same rigorous, structured analytic tradecraft to conditions inside the country.
And the conclusion they reached is pretty stark. They assess with moderate to high confidence that the U.S. is heading towards something they call competitive authoritarianism.
It definitely gets your attention.
It does. So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack that. What does that term actually mean according to them? And crucially, what trends, what evidence led them to this finding?
Okay, so competitive authoritarianism. In their framework, it's a system where the democratic institutions, elections, courts, legislatures, they still exist, at least in form.
So you still vote, there's still judges on the bench.
Exactly. But the key is that these institutions are systematically manipulated by the executive power. The goal is to consolidate control, push rivals aside, and basically make checks and balances ineffective. It's like hollowing out democracy from the inside while keeping the shell.
The appearance remains, but the function is subverted.
Got it. And the analysts pinpoint 5 main trends driving this, right? All interconnected.
That's right, 5 trends. And it's important, as you said, this is based entirely on open source material, news reports, government documents, public records, but they apply IC standards, like those confidence levels.
Which brings us to the first trend. They say this is the primary driver, assessed with high confidence. Executive overreach and the weaponization of the state.
Yeah, high confidence. That's a strong judgment in intelligence analysis. And weaponization is the key word there.
That term really shifts it from just, say, political hardball to something else. So what does this weaponization look like on the ground, according to their sources? Well, first, there's the sheer reliance on governing by decree, executive orders. The analysis points out the current administration is on track for about 275 IOs this year.
275. How does that compare?
It's more than 5 times the rate of the previous administration's first term.
Wow. And the analysis says these EOs often bypass Congress, even when the president's party is technically in control.
Exactly. It normalizes executive action over legislation, which concentrates power significantly. Then there's the push to politicize the civil service. They talk about efforts to bring back Schedule F.
Schedule F, remind us what that is again.
It basically removes job protections from potentially thousands of career officials, making them at-will employees. These are roles meant to be nonpartisan experts, analysts.
So at will means they can be fired for political reasons. Not for cause, but for loyalty.
Precisely. It injects political loyalty deep into the bureaucracy. The civil service protections are there specifically to prevent that, to ensure advice is based on expertise, not political alignment. Removing them has a huge chilling effect.
And it affects hiring, too. They mentioned the OPM's merit hiring plan.
Right. Asking applicants for essays on how they'd advance the president's EOs and policies, critics called it a loyalty test, plain and simple. It sends a clear signal.
Loyalty over competence or neutrality.
And alongside this, there's a move to dismantle independent oversight. The report details the coordinated firing of inspectors general IGs from 17 federal agencies back in January.
It's 17 in one go.
Oh.
And without the required notice to Congress.
Correct. That's not just changing personnel, it's taking out a whole layer of internal checks designed to catch waste, fraud, and abuse. It cripples independent oversight within the executive branch itself.
Okay, so EOs, politicizing the civil service, gutting IGs. What else falls under this weaponization?
The justice system and the intelligence community. The analysis sees a pattern, using the Justice Department against political rivals while giving allies, preferential treatment.
They cite specific examples.
Yes, the indictments of former FBI Director James Comey and New York AG Letitia James. The report notes these came after public pressure from the president and reportedly over objections from career staff.
Signaling the system can be used for payback.
And conversely, look at the pardons for January 6 participants, including people convicted of serious crimes like seditious conspiracy. The assessment suggests this sends a message. Certain actions, even violent ones, are okay if they align politically.
A 2-tiered system based on political allegiance. Does this extend to the intelligence community itself?
It does. They detail moves to strip security clearances from opponents Biden, Harris, Clinton, others involved in the 2016 Russia assessment.
Despite previous inquiries finding no evidence of politicization in that assessment.
Right. And it's paired with budget and staff cuts. A planned 40% staff cut at ODNI, a $700 million budget cut across the IC. The analysis argues this isn't just targeting individuals, it's hollowing out the IC's capacity, sidelining expertise, which, they warn, is a direct national security risk.
Okay, that's a heavy first trend with high confidence. So if the executive is pushing like this, the checks and balances should kick in. That leads to the second trend, weakening judicial independence. This one they rate as moderate confidence.
Moderate confidence, yes, but still a serious concern. It's not just about who gets appointed to the bench, but how the courts function. The big thing here is the reliance on the Supreme Court's emergency docket, the shadow docket.
The shadow docket, that's for emergency rulings, right? Often done quickly, without full argument of transparency.
Exactly, and the issue is the frequency. The analysis found 19 requests for emergency relief in just the first 20 weeks of this administration.
19. How does that compare?
It's almost the same number the previous administration sought over 4 years.
Wow, so it's being used routinely, not just for rare emergencies.
Right. It allows major policy changes to happen almost instantly, bypassing lower courts and public scrutiny. They cite a specific case, Noam v. Vasquez-Perdomo, where the court lifted restrictions on ICE, allowing more latitude on things like race or location in stops.
So the process itself is being altered. And the analysis also mentions direct attacks on the court's legitimacy.
Yes, rhetoric matters. When a White House official publicly calls federal judges blocking a policy legal insurrectionists, that's an attempt to frame the judiciary not as a check, but as an enemy.
Delegitimizing the referee, essentially.
Pretty much. Which leads us right into the third branch, Congress.
Trend 3. Legislative weakness and abdication. The idea here is Congress is diminished, creating a vacuum the executive can fill.
Exactly. And part of this is a long-term issue. Congress has gradually delegated a lot of its core lawmaking power to executive agencies over decades.
Which means more governing happens through agency rules, less through actual laws passed by Congress.
Right. It makes the executive stronger by default, and it makes accountability harder for voters. It's less clear who's responsible when things are buried in regulations.
And is the executive actively hindering Congress's oversight role too?
The sources suggest so. Things like new, stricter rules for congressional visits to detention facilities requiring weeks of notice, making timely oversight difficult, and internally, partisan tactics undermining the process.
Like excluding minority members from witness lists or access to documents in oversight hearings.
Yes, things like that weaken the check from within. It stops being a truly bipartisan review.
Okay, so executive overreach, judiciary under pressure, Congress weakened. What about the bedrock? Elections themselves. That's the fourth trend. Assessed with high confidence. Systemic electoral flaws.
High confidence again here. The argument is the system itself has features that favor extremism and help this autocratic trend. Things like winner-take-all districts, partisan gerrymandering. They distort representation.
They mentioned Texas drawing a new map mid-cycle just to increase partisan advantage.
Right. That's manipulating the structure. Plus, there are efforts to change the rules of voting strict voter ID for every single vote, eliminating most mail-in voting, moves that tend to affect certain groups more than others.
And making election administration more partisan.
Yes. But maybe the most alarming finding here is using the criminal justice system against political opponents for their legislative actions.
You mean the Texas example, where arrest warrants were issued for Democratic lawmakers who left the state to block certain bills.
Exactly. That's a huge step. It treats legitimate political protests using parliamentary tactics as a crime. That's moving from political disagreement into using state power to punish dissent. It's a hallmark, they say, of this shift towards competitive authoritarianism.
That is chilling. Okay, final trend, number 5. Undermining public faith, knowledge, and civil society. This sounds broader, more foundational.
It is. It's about eroding the democratic culture itself,
Yep.
attacking the sources of independent information and analysis.
Like the press.
Definitely. The constant labeling of mainstream media as fake news or the enemy, but also institutionalizing control. They point to new Pentagon rules requiring reporters to sign NDAs, non-disclosure agreements.
Wait, NDAs for reporters? Covering what?
Covering anything not formally authorized for release, even if it's unclassified information they obtained through their own reporting.
An NDA on unclassified info. That sounds like something you'd see in an analysis of authoritarian states trying to control the narrative.
That's precisely the concern, and it extends to academia, too. The analysis mentions an executive order restricting DEI efforts in federally funded institutions, and this compact for academic excellence, linking funding to adhering to certain political viewpoints.
So, constraining independent inquiry, both in the press and in universities.
The overall goal seems to be replacing evidence-based discussion with narratives based on loyalty, where expertise is dismissed as bias and disagreement is framed as extremism or disloyalty.
And does the public opinion data they cite reflect this?
Sadly, yes. It's pretty worrying. 31% of Americans surveyed think having a strong leader who does not have to bother with parliament or elections is actually a good system.
41%. Wow.
And among the president's own supporters, that number jumps to 55% who agree with that idea, specifically regarding Congress.
That suggests a significant portion of the public is becoming okay with bypassing democratic checks, which would certainly accelerate the trends the analysts are describing.
Right. So putting it all together, the 5 trends: executive overreach, weakened judiciary, legislative advocation, electoral flaws, and this attack on truth and civil society. The assessment's conclusion is that they collectively amount to a systematic dismantling of checks and balances.
Moving the system towards one based on loyalty, not law.
Exactly. And they note that international democracy indices like VDEM and Freedom House show measurable declines for the U.S., supporting this trajectory. The analysts conclude that without organized resistance from institutions, civil society, the public, this erosion is likely to continue, maybe even accelerate.
And they explicitly link this erosion of expertise due to the focus on loyalty to national security risks. Correct.
Yes, the constant churn, the firings, people leaving, it deprives the government of vital subject matter expertise and institutional experience. That lack of expertise, that instability, inherently puts national security at risk.
Which brings us to our final thought for you, the listener. Considering this analysis, what stands out most to you? Is it the hollowing out of the civil service, the pressure on the courts, the attacks on the press, the criminalization of dissent? Where do you see the most critical point of failure? And thinking about that last point, how exactly does this erosion of checks and balances, this sidelining of expertise for loyalty, put national security on the line? Something to ponder.